This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. I'm back at you this week with another terrific video story, and you can see the title on your screen. Realized my girlfriend cheated after finding a receipt for the morning after pill in her car. And she says, "It wasn't for me, I bought it for someone else." Well, we'll see about that. Now let's get into this and see what it's all about. He starts out and he says, "I was with my most recent girlfriend, Brianna, for 19 months, most all of which were very good. We went to the same high school but didn't associate much since we ran in different circles. A few years after graduating, we bumped into each other at the mall and started talking." At the mall? Really? I didn't think anybody still goes to the mall. "While we were chatting, she gave subtle clues she was interested in me. We met for a drink the following evening, and it was spontaneous combustion. I ended up staying over." Uh-oh, that's a red flag. Now it sounds good, but if this is someone you're looking to have a long-term relationship with, you gotta watch out for that. "And after that, we spent every night together for the next 8 months. Looking back now, I'd have to say those were the best days of my life so far." So he was in the honeymoon period and living it up, and that's why it was so good. "About 10 months into our relationship, my apartment lease was coming due, and she asked me to move in with her. She had a nice 2-bedroom, and I was over there most of the time, so I moved in and started paying more than my share of the expenses. I was making a lot more than her, and she was struggling with debt, so I didn't mind." And that's another red flag. Why is she struggling with debt? Is it because she's living above her means? If she is, that's a very bad sign. "Things were great, and we settled into daily life as a couple. It felt like being married, but in a good way. We were still very active in the bedroom, not daily, but darn close to it. We often discussed marriage and having kids, but agreed it was a little too soon for that since we were still learning about each other." Well, that's one good decision he made. "We each have our own circle of friends, but after we started our relationship, we rarely hung out with them unless we were together. Once in a while, I'd go out and grab a drink or shoot pool with my buds, and Brianna would go out shopping or get her nails done with her friends. She also went out after work a few times, but nothing consistently, and she'd always come home early. Brianna's two closest friends are a coworker I'll call Lisa, and Marcy, a girl who went to our high school who was 3 years older than us. Lisa seemed like a trustworthy person, and I had become good friends with her boyfriend Mike." Now listen to this. "Marcy, on the other hand, is the type who goes through guys like paper towels. Every week she seems to be using a new role." This guy should be a comedian. "A little over a month ago, Brianna told me Marcy's birthday was coming up, and she and several friends were going to take her out to dinner at a new place that opened near Marcy's apartment. She said because they were planning to have a drink or two, she asked if it would be okay if she stayed the night at Marcy's. I told her that was fine and really didn't think too much about it since she gave me so much advance notice. Several days before the event, she reminded me and asked what I was going to do that night. I said I might grab a drink and watch the game with Mike since Lisa would be with her at Marcy's party. Brianna was pleased to hear this and was glad Mike and I were becoming such good friends. She told me things were getting serious between Lisa and Mike and said Lisa told her she thought he was the one. Friday evening came and went and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Brianna texted me several times during the night and we talked twice by phone. The last text she sent was at 1:13 a.m. saying she loved me and was going to bed. The next morning she called around 8 to let me know she'd be home around 11. She said she was going to take a shower and have some breakfast with Marcy and Lisa before coming home. She told me she really missed me and couldn't wait to see me. Brianna arrived home a little before 11 and we spent some time cuddling and catching up about the previous night. She told me they went out and had a nice dinner and then went back to Marcy's where they drank wine and talked until going to bed. She said it was fun, but she wished I was there. Now remember that statement. Saturday afternoon, she and I went out for a long bike ride, then stopped at one of our favorite pubs for a casual dinner. When we got home, we each took showers, and after that, She was all over me. I mean, all over me. As I mentioned before, we were normally quite active and tend to be adventurous, but that night she was extra horny. Now, again, that sounds great, doesn't it? But that's also a potential red flag because what do we call that, folks? Love bombing. On Sunday, we basically hung around the apartment, catching up on chores and paying bills. She threw in a load of laundry and decided to clean out the fridge while I went out to clean the inside of our cars and change the cabin air filters. While cleaning her car, I found a receipt from CVS that was lodged between her seat and the console. So if it was CVS, it was one of those receipts that are like a mile long. At first, I didn't really look at it and just set it up on the driver's seat as I continued to clean. While vacuuming, I noticed the date on the receipt was from the previous morning at 7:14 a.m. from a store that's a good 10 miles from Marcy's place. This got my attention and I stopped doing what I was doing to take a closer look. There were two items listed on the receipt and the total bill was over $60. I recognized one of the products as it was a well-known feminine hygiene brand, but the other more expensive product I had never heard of. I thought, why would she go out and buy these things right after the store opened, and what's this item for $44.99? I Googled it to find out the item was a brand of morning after pill. I'm sure you can guess my reaction. I was speechless. I sat there in the passenger seat of her car looking at that receipt and thinking through all the possibilities. I thought maybe it wasn't hers or maybe she bought it for someone else. Really, dude, you thought that? No matter what scenarios I played through, I kept coming back to the same conclusion. Brianna cheated on me Friday night. The evidence was all there, though only circumstantial at that point. I considered going in and directly asking her about it, but decided not to. Well, that was probably pretty smart because you know what she would have done? Is just deny, deny, deny because that's all you have is that receipt. And she could say, hey, I got this for someone else and I don't want to tell you who it is because I want to maintain her privacy. There's a lot of BS she could have told you. He says I decided instead to try to get a look at her phone to see if I could find further evidence. After finishing up with the cars, I went inside and acted like nothing was up. For the rest of the day, we hung out and I kept up appearances even though I was simmering inside. She kept her phone by her side the entire day and I wasn't able to access it, so that night I waited till she fell asleep and checked it then. I entered her passcode and checked her text messages, but there was nothing. The only recent texts were the ones she sent me on Friday and Saturday and several that she sent to her mother over the weekend. I knew she had texted back and forth with Marcy and Lisa several times during the day, so this was another clue as she had obviously deleted those messages. And if they're deleting messages, you know something's going on. Monday at work, I kept thinking about everything and it was really bothering me. I decided to call Mike and asked if he could meet up after work as I wanted to get his advice on something. He was available, so we met back at the Irish pub where we hung out on Friday. I told him what I discovered and what my fear was and asked his opinion. He agreed with me and said it sounded pretty bad. He also told me Lisa had been acting a little off ever since that night. He said he didn't think much of it at the time, but now he's suspicious after hearing what I told him. Mike said Lisa was coming over to his place that evening and he was going to sneak a peek at her phone while she was there. We left the bar and he called me later that night to advise he wasn't able to check her phone because she was guarding it like a hawk. Another red flag. He said he saw her read and respond to several messages while she was with him, but didn't know who she was texting with. At that point, we were at a dead end, but both of us were highly suspicious. We decided to keep things on the down low and keep digging for more evidence before jumping to conclusions. That evidence came the following evening when Mike was over at Lisa's parents' house having dinner. At one point during the evening, she walked off and left her phone in front of him. No one was around, so we used that opportunity to look at it and discovered a trove of messages between Lisa, Brianna, and Marcy that painted a clear picture of what really happened that night. So let's find out what did go on that night. He says, turns out the ladies went on a triple date with Marcy's current guy and two of his friends. So old Marcy's got a new boyfriend and now she's setting up her friends with his friends. They all went out to dinner and after went bar hopping until well after midnight. Instead of going back to Marcy's place to crash, the ladies paired off with their dates and spent the night with them. Isn't that amazing? Now, I wonder if this was the first time these three were with these three guys, or if this had been going on for some time. He says that's why Brianna had a receipt for a CVS store that was nowhere near Marcy's apartment. Apparently, when the sun came up, Brianna and Lisa came to their senses as their texts indicate a sheer level of panic, with them talking about buying next morning pills and douches. Oh my goodness. So they really sobered up and they said, oh no, what have we done? They met up at the CVS near Lisa's apartment to buy the items, after which they went over to Lisa's place where I assume they took the pills and cleaned themselves up. Mike took snapshots of the pertinent messages and sent them to me. Then he and I got together the next day to formulate a plan for confronting our soon-to-be ex-girlfriends. We decided to do it at the apartment I shared with Brianna. The plan was to tell them, show them the text and the receipt, then leave them there to stew in their juices. After they arrived, I started the conversation by asking Brianna and Lisa if there were any details about Marcy's party they left out. They looked at each other, then looked at us and said no, shaking their heads slightly. Mike then spoke up and asked where they slept that night. In unison, they both said, at Marcy's. After this, I sent them the screenshots that Mike got from Lisa's phone along with the CVS receipt I found in Brianna's car and asked them to explain. They both looked down at the messages on their phones and kept their heads down, acting like it was taking them forever to figure out what the messages were. That's because you surprised them with this information and they didn't know what to say. They were probably looking at those texts saying, uh-oh, this looks pretty bad. What story can we spin here? Realizing they were stalling, Mike finally asked what they had to say for themselves. They looked at each other, then Brianna looked at me with a sad look on her face. I think she knew she was caught and didn't even attempt to lie. Lisa, on the other hand, went on a tirade about Mike invading her privacy, asking him how could he do such a thing, trying to deflect blame. We didn't bite and didn't bother asking who, what, or why. We just got up to leave. I told Brianna it was over and I'd be back to move my stuff out. Then Mike told Lisa he was breaking up with her. They both started crying but didn't try stopping us. Again, I think they knew they were caught and didn't know what to say, so they probably thought tears would work, but we didn't bite and left. Good for you. Since then, I've been crashing on Mike's couch while I look for a place. Brianna and Lisa told us they ended their friendship with Marcy and are blaming her for what they did. Mike and I know they're throwing her under the bus as she didn't force them to do anything. They've both been pleading with us for another chance, but we're done. No thank you, we've had enough, he says. Yeah, I don't think you can come back from that. That's just slimy. We got word through sources that Lisa's going to be moving in with Brianna after her lease is up so they can share expenses. When we heard this, we laughed and said that place is going to see a lot of action as these ladies are obviously going through their W phase. He says, we're just glad we found this out now before we went too far with them. If the cheating wasn't bad enough, the thing that made it even worse was they both came back and did it with us the next evening. Poor Mike went south on Lisa and didn't wear a condom. The OP says, thankfully I wore one and was a recipient and not a giver that night. We've since gotten tested and we're all clear, but we're going to get tested again next month to make sure. It's funny, after finding out what Brianna did, I don't even miss her. I know I might feel differently down the road, but that's how I feel now. Mike told me he feels the same way about Lisa. We're done with them and now it's on to what's next. And that's the end of his original post. And he doesn't have any updates, but I titled that the end of his original post because I think this guy is going to come back at some point in the future and update. Now I want to take a look at some of the comments he received, but before I do that, I want to remind you, if you like what you've heard so far, make sure you hit that like button. That will help out the channel tremendously and help get this video seen across the world. Now, let's take a look at those comments. The first one is from a woman. She said, I'd suggest counseling before completely giving up on your relationships, as we've all made mistakes and learned from trial and error. You even said that they regretted what they did the next morning. It's like when you were young and you touched a hot stove the first time and learned not to do it again. The same thing might be true here. No, lady, this is a lot different than when you're young and you're learning things for the first time. These women were adults. They knew exactly what they were doing and they knew exactly what the potential outcomes could be. And unfortunately for them, or fortunately for them, they got caught. The next response is from a guy. He says, since this seemed to be a one off for both Brianna and Lisa, I might consider giving them a second chance. Really, guy? No doubt they broke your trust and that will take time to get back, but in today's world, do you think you're going to find anyone better? At least with them, they've learned a lesson and you know what you're dealing with. Just the thought, is this guy out of his mind thinking about giving them a second chance after all of that? And what's this talk about, hey, you're not going to find anybody better out there? If there's no one better out there than these two, then it's probably best to do without. But I know there are better ones out there than these two. So this guy doesn't make any sense. The next response is from a woman. She says, speaking as a woman, what really made this bad situation worse was when they each were intimate with you the following day. I'm sure in their minds they were doing it to try to compensate for what they had done the previous night, but that's just disgusting and they put your health at risk. For that reason alone, I'd have nothing to do with them. And I totally agree with this woman. And finally, we've got another response from a guy. He says, you did the right thing, mates. It may be painful now, but in time you'll see you made the best decision. As I always say, it's better to have no relationship than to be in a bad relationship, especially where cheating is involved. Good luck in your search. And that's a sample of some of the responses he got back. And now I want to take a look at what I think are the morals of the story. The first one. Be cautious of those who go all the way on the first date. Now, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of guys out there that are going to disagree with me, and I've gotten emails when I've done previous stories where I've made this statement. Yes, I'm sure there are success stories out there, but I'm saying as a general rule, I would bet that most of these situations where a couple has hooked up on the first date, it does not end up being a long-term relationship. It's just a big red flag. Next. Think long and hard before getting involved with anyone mired in debt. And you got to find out, why are they mired in debt? Have they been living above their means? Or was it a situation where they truly had a hardship? Maybe they had an illness. Maybe they were providing for their family. That's different. But if it was a case where they're just living above their means, that's a big red flag. And you want to avoid those people because guess what? You're going to get saddled with that debt. Next. Girls' nights are nothing but trouble. How many stories have I done where these type of events end up ending relationships? I'll say nothing more. Next. Take note of one's friends as they will influence their actions. And this guy said right up front, this Marcy was trouble. And if your girlfriend or your wife's hanging around someone like that, eventually they're going to rub off on them. So if it were me, I would say, listen, you need to distance yourself from that person. Yes, you can still be friends with them, but I don't want you hanging out with them or going out with them. Next, be suspicious of any form of love bombing. Again, it sounds great. Just like this guy, he described his night and his girlfriend was off the charts, with energy and doing all these things to him. But listen, if that's out of the ordinary, you got to step back and say, why is she doing this? This is not my birthday. This isn't any special day. Why am I getting this treatment? Well, in this case, we know what happened. Next, always use protection, always, for whatever you're doing, especially in today's day and age. Next, if you've been cheated on, you must get tested for STDs. And I would suggest, like these two guys, getting tested twice. Get tested, make sure it's clear, and then go back maybe in 30 or 45 days or whatever the doctor recommends and get tested again just to make sure you're totally clear. And finally, once cheating has occurred, it's over. Move on with your life. So those are my thoughts on this story, and now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story, and how do you think these guys handled this situation? Would you have done what they did, or would you have done something completely different? Would you have given these women a second chance after what they did? Tell us about it in the comments. Also, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel. And don't forget to follow me on X. And I will talk to you on the next one.